My name is Walter Grady, and I'm 78 years old. I'm sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I don't really want, watching the light change on the linoleum floor like it's got someplace to be. The house is quiet in a way it never used to be. Not the peaceful kind, the empty kind, the kind that makes you hear your own swallowing. I'm not telling you this because I think my story is special. It isn't. That's part of what hurts. I'm telling you because I've started waking up in the night with my heart thumping like I've done something wrong, and I have. Not one big thing you can point at, just a lifetime of small delays, a lifetime of later. And now later is sitting right across from me, looking me dead in the face. There's a photo on the fridge of my wife, Lillian. She's smiling at the camera like she doesn't know what's coming. Like she doesn't know she's already gone. She died 3 years ago in a hospice bed that smelled like disinfectant and old flowers. I was there. I held her hand. I told her I loved her. I did all the right things at the very end. That's what I tell myself anyway. But love doesn't live at the end. Love lives in the middle, in the Tuesday afternoons, in the boring parts, in the parts I kept postponing, because I was so sure time would be polite and wait for me. It doesn't. The clock on the wall ticks like a nagging finger. Sometimes I think about taking it down, but then I'd just hear the silence louder. At 78, you start noticing how thin everything is. Your skin, your friendships, your calendar, the future. It's like the world is a sheet you can almost see through. I don't have many people left to talk to. My old friends are either dead or too tired to return calls. My kids are busy. They love me. I believe that. But their love is the kind you schedule. A Sunday visit, a quick phone call while they're driving home from work, a Christmas card with a picture of grandchildren I barely know. That's not their fault. That's just how life is now. And maybe it's what I built. I spent most of my life being responsible. That's what I called it. Being the one who showed up, who worked hard, who kept the roof from leaking and the bills paid and the lawn trimmed. I wore responsibility like a medal. I didn't understand it was also a hiding place. When I was younger, I thought love was something you had, like a marriage license. Like a ring, like a house with both names on the deed. I thought once you had it, it stayed. Like furniture. I thought there would always be tomorrow to say the things I was too embarrassed to say today. I was wrong. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where men worked and women managed everything else, and nobody talked about feelings unless someone died. My father wasn't cruel, but he was hard. He'd come home from the factory with grease on his hands and a silence around him like armor. My mother tried. She'd touch his shoulder sometimes. He'd stiffen like he wasn't used to being touched. That was my first lesson in marriage. You live next to someone for decades, and you don't really reach for them. So I learned to be useful. I learned that being a man meant being needed, not being known. When I met Lillian, I was 24. She worked at a pharmacy counter, wore her hair pinned back in a way that made her neck look long and delicate like a dancer. She had these plain brown eyes that didn't seem like much until you noticed how steady they were, like she was always paying attention. I'd go in to buy shaving cream I didn't need, just to see her. She'd ring me up and smile like she had a secret. I never felt like that before, like someone saw right through me and still didn't walk away. We got married fast. People did back then. There wasn't this long engagement and Pinterest boards and all that. You met, you dated, you decided. I proposed on her parents' porch with her father watching through the screen door like I was taking a tool out of his shed. She said yes, like she'd already decided, Our first apartment smelled like old carpet and frying oil from the downstairs neighbor. We didn't have much. A lumpy sofa from her aunt, a kitchen table with one leg shorter than the others, so we folded a paper napkin under it to keep it from rocking. It's funny what you remember. We'd sit at that table and eat spaghetti off chipped plates and talk about nothing. I didn't realize that was the good part. Then life started. The real life. The busy life. I got a job as a foreman at a manufacturing plant. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid. I started coming home tired, covered in sweat and metal dust. Lillian would be in the kitchen moving around like she had her own system. A pot on the stove, laundry in a basket, the radio on low. She'd ask me about my day. I'd shrug and say, "Same as always." She'd tell me something about her day, about the neighbor's dog getting loose, or her sister calling, or a recipe she wanted to try. I'd nod. Sometimes I'd really listen. Other times I'd be thinking about work, about the machine that was acting up, about the new guy who didn't know what he was doing. I thought I was being a good husband because I wasn't out drinking or cheating. I was home. I was there. But being in the same room isn't the same as being present. We had 2 kids. First Molly, then Brian. Suddenly there were diapers and bottles and school forms and doctor visits. Lillian ran the house like a small country, and I was the tax collector. I brought in money. I fixed things. I drove the kids to baseball practice sometimes. I was useful. I didn't notice how often Lillian looked at me like she was waiting for something. Sometimes she'd say, "Walter, are you listening?" And I'd snap out of my head and say, yeah, of course." But I hadn't been. It wasn't that I didn't love her. I did. I loved her the way you love your home. You assume it'll be there when you come back. I thought love was stable, like a foundation. But love is more like a fire. It needs attention, not grand gestures, just tending, just showing up when nobody's watching. I kept thinking I'd do that later. There were small moments. I can see them now like someone rewinding a film. The time she bought a new dress, a simple blue one, and came out of the bedroom and said, "What do you think?" I barely looked up from the newspaper. I said, "Looks nice." She stood there a second longer than she needed to. Then she went back in and changed. I can remember that pause. I can remember it like a weight dropping. Or the night she said, "We never go anywhere anymore." And I said, "We're tired, Lil. We got responsibilities." She said, "We're alive." I laughed like she was being dramatic. I didn't mean to laugh. She got quiet after that. People don't realize how relationships die. They think it's an explosion, a big fight, a betrayal. Sometimes it is. But sometimes it's just a slow leak. 1,000 little disappointments that never get talked about because you're busy, because you're proud, because you think there will be time. Lillian started making her own life without me, not in a secretive way, just she filled the space I left empty. She joined a book club. She started volunteering at the library. She would go out with her sister on Saturdays, and I'd stay home and do yard work like that was important. I told myself I was giving her freedom. What I was really doing was letting the distance grow because it was easier than facing the fact that I didn't know how to bridge it. And every time she tried, I met her halfway and then turned back. There was a period in my 40s when work got intense. We were trying to keep the plant from closing. Layoffs were looming. I felt like my whole identity depended on keeping that place afloat. I'd stay late. I'd come home after the kids were asleep. Lillian would leave dinner in the oven and she'd be in bed when I came in. Sometimes I'd crawl in beside her and she'd already be turned away. I'd think, she's asleep. But now, I wonder how many times she was awake, staring at the wall, waiting for me to be more than a shadow slipping into bed. One night I came home and found her sitting at the kitchen table, the same table we'd eaten spaghetti at years before. She was holding a mug of tea. She looked older than she should have. She said, "Walter, do you even miss me when you're gone?" It wasn't angry. It was honest. That's the part that scared me. And I said something stupid. I said, "Of course I do. Don't start this tonight. Don't start this." Like her loneliness was an argument she was picking. She stared at me, and I remember thinking she looked like someone who'd been waiting at a bus stop for hours, and the bus kept passing without stopping. She nodded, like she'd heard what she needed to hear. Then she got up and went to bed. I didn't follow. I washed the mug and turned off the lights and went to sleep like everything was fine. That was my gift. My ability to convince myself things were fine. The kids grew up. Molly moved out first. Brian went to college and didn't come back except for holidays. Lillian and I became two people sharing a house. We were polite. We worked together. We did what had to be done. But the tenderness was thin. Sometimes I'd look at her across the living room and feel a sudden ache, like I missed her even though she was right there. And I'd think, I should say something. But then the phone would ring, or the news would come on, or I'd remember I needed to fix the gutter, and the moment would pass. I thought I had time to catch up later. Then one day, I came home and found her sitting on the couch with a hand pressed to her chest. Her face was pale, like paper. I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "I don't know. It's tight." We went to the hospital. The smell of that place still gets in my nose sometimes. They did tests. They kept her overnight. They said it was a minor heart issue, manageable with medication. We went home, and I promised myself I'd do better. And I did for a while. I brought her flowers. I held her hand more. I asked her about her day and actually listened. I thought I could make up for it with a few good months. But habits are heavy things. Life pulls you back into routine. Work still needed me. Bills still came. And after the scare passed, I slid back into myself. Not all the way, but enough. Lillian never complained much after that. That's what haunts me. People think silence means everything is okay. Sometimes silence means someone has stopped hoping you'll change. When I retired at 66, I imagined we'd finally have time. We'd travel. We'd take walks. We'd sit on the porch and talk like we used to. I had this picture in my mind of the second half of life being softer. But retirement doesn't fix what you never built. You can't suddenly become close with someone you spent decades keeping at arm's length. We tried. We took a trip to Tennessee. We went to see the Smoky Mountains. We stayed in a cabin with a hot tub we never used. We went out to dinner and talked about the weather and the menu and the traffic. And I remember sitting across from her in a restaurant, watching her pick at her food, and realizing I didn't know what was inside her anymore. I didn't know what she feared. I didn't know what she wanted. I didn't know what she dreamed about when she was young. She had carried those things alone for so long that they had become private, and I had let that happen. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a shouting match or a confession. It was a doctor's appointment. She had been losing weight. She said it was nothing. "Just getting older," she said. She always said that, like aging was a blanket explanation for everything. The doctor found a lump, then more tests, then a word that landed in the room like a heavy object: cancer. We sat in the car afterward, not starting the engine. The air smelled like her hand lotion and the stale paper from the clinic. She stared out the window and said very quietly, "I'm tired." I reached for her hand. I said, "We'll fight it." She looked at me, and her eyes were steady like always. She said, "I'm not scared of dying, Walter. I'm scared of dying without ever really being held." I didn't know what to say, because she was right. I thought I had loved her. But love isn't a feeling you keep in your chest. It's what you do with your time. And I had spent my time elsewhere. The months after that were a blur of chemo appointments, waiting rooms, pill organizers, phone calls with insurance, meals she barely touched. I did everything. I became her caretaker. I learned how to change sheets without jostling her. I learned the sound she made when she was trying not to cry. And I kept thinking, if I do this right, maybe it will make up for the years. But you can't pay back time with effort. Time doesn't accept apologies. One evening toward the end, she was lying in bed with the lamp on. Her hair was gone. Her face looked smaller, like her skin was trying to retreat. She asked me to climb in beside her. I did. I held her, really held her. Not the quick arm around the shoulder, not the polite touch. I held her like she was the only thing in the world. She rested her head against my chest and she said, "This is what I wanted." That sentence has been living inside me ever since. This is what I wanted. Not the house, not the money, not the vacations, not the new appliances. This, and I gave it to her when she was leaving. She died early in the morning. The light was coming in around the blinds, pale and cold. Her breathing slowed like someone turning down a radio. I kept talking to her, telling her stories about when we were young, about the apartment, about the rocking table leg. I don't know if she heard me. And then she was gone. The days after were strange. People brought casseroles. They hugged me and said, "She's in a better place." I wanted to tell them to shut up, not because they meant harm, because the words didn't touch what I was feeling. The house felt like a museum. Her shoes by the door, her mug in the cabinet, her sweater hanging on the back of a chair like she'd be back in a minute. I kept expecting her to call my name from another room. For months, I would wake up and reach for her in bed and touch cold sheets. That's when it hit me. Not in one big wave, but in small, daily stings. I had spent decades beside her, and I had not fully been with her, and now I would never get the chance again. People talk about regrets like they're lessons, like they're useful. Sometimes they're just wounds. Sometimes they don't teach you anything except how irreversible life is. I can't go back to that moment when she asked, "Do you even miss me?" I can't go back to the blue dress. I can't go back to the nights she waited for me to come to bed and I stayed in the living room watching television. I can't go back and sit at that old kitchen table and say, "I'm here. I'm really here." All I can do is sit at this table now, older, emptier, and finally honest. And that's the part that makes me feel sick sometimes. Because if I had been this honest earlier, we might have had something different. Not perfect, just warmer. There's a particular loneliness that comes from knowing you were loved, but you didn't fully receive it, and knowing you didn't fully give it back. I still talk to her sometimes, not in a spooky way, just out loud, like she's in the next room. I'll say, "Lil, I'm sorry." And then I'll laugh a little because sorry is such a small word for such a big loss. I see younger couples sometimes, holding hands in the grocery store, bickering about what kind of bread to buy. And I want to tell them something, but I don't. because nobody wants advice from an old man in aisle 5. But if you're listening to me right now, maybe you're the right person to hear it. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I don't know your life. I don't know your responsibilities. I don't know what you're carrying. I just know what I carried. I carried the idea that love was patient, that it would wait until I had less stress, less work, fewer bills, more energy. I carried the idea that the important things could be postponed, and I learned too late that love doesn't wait. It doesn't stomp its feet and demand attention. It just fades, quietly, like a photo left in the sun. One day you look up and realize you're living with a stranger you used to know. And then one day, they're gone. And you'd give anything to go back and sit with them on an ordinary night and say, "Tell me what you're thinking." You'd give anything to listen. If there's someone in your life you keep meaning to call, someone you keep meaning to hold a little longer, someone you keep assuming will always be there, I hope you understand that assumption is a dangerous thing. Not because tragedy is guaranteed, but because time is always moving, whether you're paying attention or not. I used to think being busy was proof I was doing life right. Now I think being present is the only proof that matters. That doesn't mean quitting your job or selling your house or making grand romantic speeches. I never learned how to do speeches. I still don't. It means looking up. It means sitting down when someone wants to talk, even if the dishes aren't done. It means not treating affection like something you'll get to when the calendar clears. Because the calendar doesn't clear, life doesn't suddenly become easy, and people don't stay forever. Sometimes I wonder what Lillian would say if she could see me now, sitting here talking into the quiet like it's a confession booth. Maybe she'd smile and shake her head and say, "Oh, Walter." Maybe she'd forgive me. Maybe she already did. But forgiveness isn't the same as getting your time back. That's what I want you to understand. You can be forgiven and still lose what mattered. You can say, "I love you" at the end and still spend a lifetime not showing it. The last time I touched her hand, it was cool and light, like it was already letting go of this world. I remember thinking, this is the last time. This is the last time. And I wanted to scream at my younger self. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and say, "Stop acting like you've got forever. Stop saving your love for later, like it's money in a bank." But you can't talk to your younger self. You can only talk to you. If this meant something to you, if it landed somewhere tender, you don't have to do anything big with it. You don't have to share it or comment or make a plan. Just maybe let it make you a little quieter for a moment. Maybe let it make you look at the people in your life like they're not permanent, because they aren't. I'm 78 now. I don't have a long runway left. I feel it in my bones when I get out of bed, in the way my hands shake when I button a shirt, in the way the world feels farther away than it used to. Some mornings, I still catch myself thinking, "I'll do that later." And then I stop, because later is a thin promise. I don't know how much time I have. None of us do. But I know what I don't want to do anymore. I don't want to let love sit unattended until it goes cold. So I sit at this kitchen table. I drink my coffee. I look at her photo on the fridge. And I tell the truth finally, even if it's late. Love doesn't wait, and neither does life.